Why do wildlife need room to roam? And how does solving this problem address the biodiversity crisis and climate crisis? It turns out that when we have increasing humanity surrounding protected areas like here in Nairobi National Park, science shows us that species literally start to disappear from those parks. Also, the ability for species to migrate is reduced. What does all this mean? This means that wildlife can't find their homes, their food, and their mates the more that we pen them in. There's no animal that shows the need to move better than an animal named Pluie the wolf. She was collared with one of the very first satellite collars, a predecessor to GPS collars, just south of Banff National Park. And she made that 100,000-kilometer jaunt across 2 countries, 2 provinces, 3 states, 3 national parks over 2 years before she was legally shot just south of Kootenay National Park. What did her movement show us? She showed us that parks are absolutely essential, but they're not big enough to sustain animals like her. So it was after her movement in 1993 that a bunch of conservationists and scientists from Canada and the United States got together and came up with a vision that they thought was at the scale that would conserve animals like her. From Yellowstone and just south of Grand Teton National Park in Wyoming, all the way up to the Arctic Circle, an area 3 times the size of California. People called it a wingnut idea. Conservation had never happened on that scale. At that time, they thought that climate change was a problem, and in fact, this technical graph really demonstrates it. I won't ask where you all are on that graph. But they did know that the Yellowstone to Yukon region is a place that ensures that animals can survive and has through different periods of climate change. Animals can go north, they can go up in elevation, and they can go to different slopes and aspects. But also, more recently, one of my colleagues has been compiling and figuring out how much carbon is actually just stored in the Waidawi region. It's a tremendous amount. And even more cool, he figured out that on an average year, the Yellowstone to Yukon region sucks out of the atmosphere the same amount that 85% of passenger vehicles in Canada emit over a full year. This is the scale that we can stop the biodiversity crisis and help to solve the climate crisis. So how do we get work done? How do you actually do conservation at the scale of 3 Californias? Well, the first thing is having that vision, the vision at the scale of Yellowstone to Yukon that nature takes primacy. The second is having the best available information. What I mean by that is having the best available Western science, indigenous, and local knowledge. That helps us to identify the challenges and solve the problems. The third ingredient is having a community the size of a mountain. So what do I mean by that? We know that at least 800 different entities, that might be First Nations or Native Americans, local or regional or national governments, nonprofits, scientists, businesses, all working together on local projects that matter at the scale of Waidawi. So what happens, so it's been about 30 years, what actually happens when you work at that scale with that number of entities? It turns out a lot can happen. So here is a picture of what protected areas looked like in 1993 when the vision of connecting and protecting it was created. And here's what it looked like just 25 years in. Protected areas increased by more than 80%. That's double the rate of protected area growth in the rest of North America. So that's a good example of what's happening. Thank you. a landscape of hope, but we have more to do. We know that nature needs about 50% of ecosystems to function in the long term. So in the Y2Y region, we're looking to get to 30% protected areas by 2030, which is a global conservation target. So what do we need to do to get there? Well, fortunately in this region, we have about 59 million acres done, but we still need another 50 million acres. Yellowstone National Park is 2.2 million acres, so this is a stretch. What's really amazing is we already have 14 million acres agreed to. We're waiting for those governments, federal governments, regional governments, and indigenous governments to designate them on the ground, but we know that they're happening. And we also have at least 20 visions by indigenous peoples of new indigenous-led protected areas. And if we get those, and many of those are about to happen, it's really exciting, we will get to over 30% protected areas by 2030. So the first ingredient was protect. The second one is connect. Remember, isolated protected areas don't do well. We need to create bridges and other kinds of connectivity between those protected areas. Let me tell you a story about Lingenpolter, this bear in Montana. The two squiggly lines are two time periods that this animal was moving, and the white line is Interstate 90. But what I want you to focus on are the X's all across the highway. The X's are where that animal approached the highway and bounced off. Approached the highway and bounced off over 40 times until it finally found a stream with a bridge where it could get under on the far left-hand side. It's a poster child for why I-90 is the impenetrable barrier in the Yellowstone to Yukon region. And I'm happy to say today that Montana Department of Transportation is committing to figure out how to get wildlife safely across roads while people travel along it. People always ask, do those wildlife crossing structures work? And I love this because it really shows how grizzly bears in Banff National Park, where they put 44 crossing structures, including 6 overpasses, at the beginning didn't know where the crossings were. But the fencing funneled them to these crossing structures such that by 2008, some bears were having breakfast on one side and dinner on the other side. Some were just occasionally visiting friends, and some were running through, scampering along, trying to avoid all the big bruins to find their own home range. Lots of other wildlife also use these crossing structures. This is the most well-studied crossing structure system in North America and has inspired crossings around the world. The next question is, well, do they work? Do they keep people safe? I'm one of the 70% of Montanans who have actually hit a hooved animal like this moose. And if you hit it going fast enough, a moose, it will flip into your lap, and it will be bad for both of you. Turns out these structures and the associated fencing decrease hooved animal collisions by 96%. They work. So the third ingredient is about having nature-positive communities, communities that care and make positive decisions. I'll talk about one aspect of that, and it's about coexistence. There's 3 kinds. Coexistence in the backcountry, whether you ski, hike, snowmobile, ATV. We want people to get out in nature, but we want them to do it in a way that leaves nature intact for multiple generations. In urban areas, we actually don't want toothy animals in urban areas. We want to keep them out by having appropriate trash management, fruit tree, chicken management, etc. And then in the ranching environment, we got to keep livestock away from those large carnivores. This woman on this horse is watching this grizzly bear family, and behind her are those cattle. She's a range rider, keeping both safe. So, if we want to give wildlife room to roam in the Yellowstone to Yukon region, we've got to expand our protected areas. We've got to make sure they stay connected or reconnect them. And we need to ensure that communities care about nature and care about their backyard for now and into the future. The cool thing is that this idea of large landscape conservation and seascape conservation is spreading around the world. I was at a conference and this woman said, "You're Y to Y, I'm from B to B. We want to be the marine equivalent to you all." And that's how we're going to solve the biodiversity problem and climate change problem around the world, is by large-scale conservation. We need to do that, otherwise we're going to lose critters from habitats that are too small. We need to do it if we want humanity to maintain its soul and have our own places to go. For me, it's really about my children. I want them to be able to run wild rivers, to experience nature, and for future generations to do the same. Isn't that what we all want? Thank you.